I'm Ashley. I'm a senior career specialist with CareerFoundry. Had a great time working with Emily for part of her job search. And I am currently here in Berlin, Germany, where CareerFoundry has our offices. Emily, if you want to briefly introduce yourself.
Sure. I'm originally from Hong Kong. I went to school I pretty much went to the United States when I was 16 and spent a lot of time there. I'm originally an industrial designer, and I worked in Hong Kong for about 10 years after I graduated. And then now I moved to England.
Okay, so I think we're gonna start with my interview with you, and we're gonna kind of talk about this part of your journey. So how you made this transition from being a product designer in Hong Kong, and how you made this transition to being a UX designer in the UK. So I guess my first question for you would be if you could give us a little background on your work as a product designer in all these countries you work with. And so where did you work? What did you do? And what prompted you to transition to digital design?
Sure. So it sounds very cliche, but I'm one of those that I started to draw when I was like a kid and before I know how to walk. So I was very much I knew I wanted to do something with my art skills. And so when I went to school in the Cleveland Institute of Arts in Cleveland, Ohio, I really liked the industrial design department. So that was the most difficult departments to get into. Because they don't really take that many students at the time. So then I said to myself, okay, well, then I'll do industrial design. So Cleveland Institute of Arts used to be one of the top industrial design school. I sort of thrived pretty well there. I got internship at the Ford Motor Company. I had an internship with Lear Corporation. And because of that, I won scholarship to go to France, study at the Strat University. I also got an internship in Emily Lai Corporation working for Nissan concept cars. So for a while, I was really in that car design space in industrial design. But I switched that because I realized that it's great. It's a lot of drawing, but it didn't have a lot of meaning in terms of design thinking. And it's more about form follow function. So in 2004, when I graduated, I started to work more in medical design. And why I do that, because I realized that it has a lot to do with research, has a lot to do with understanding the users, and hence, based on all these details, how do you design from it? So in 2008, a very professional environment, I would tell people that I wanted to get my graduate degree. So that's why I went back to Hong Kong. But in reality, it's because I got my heart broken. So I decided to go back to Hong Kong. So in 2008, I went back to Hong Kong, and then I got my graduate degree with design strategy from the Hong Kong Polytechnic University. So that's why, but also I got my heart broken. So, but then that opened up a really good, I didn't know what it was. I just kind of went back. But because I speak Chinese, Mandarin, Cantonese, so when I started working, even though I didn't try, I became a manager. And very quickly, I was able to work with a lot of really amazing company and people as well, a lot of really talented designers. Some of the companies I can mention is Johnson & Johnson. I worked with Albert Nutrition, Ford Motor Company also with some of the electric car project that they have from Shanghai as well as in India. I work with Australian company ResMed. I work a lot with P&G, Procter & Gamble. Medtronics, which is another medical design device company. I work a lot of Unilever, all of their innovation in hair, shampoo, devices. Philips used to be in Hong Kong, so Philips has a very close relationship with the design studio that I used to work at. I also work with Mars, Samsung, Haier. So a lot of all of these companies that has a manufacturing site in China would always come to us and say, oh, do you want some industrial design, and do you want something to be done? And the reason why I worked there and then decided to transfer into digital design, it's not that I want to transfer into digital design. It's I start seeing a lot of clients asking me about, hey, we're making a toaster, but we want to have an app with it. And or like we're making a refrigerator, but we want a digital touch screen on it. So eventually the industrial design become very much involved and connect to digital design, and to the point that I can't even pull myself away from that space. That's when I realized that I need to do something about it. And that's when I took a course with CareerFoundry.
Yeah, and kind of going back to the real reason that you moved back to Hong Kong, I think if there's a theme here with your story, is that it doesn't matter how successful you are, sometimes life still happens. And so, it's even in people who work for big companies, sometimes bad stuff can happen. And so we'll kind of what I want to explore here is kind of how you developed the right mindset to overcome some of these challenges that came your way, for sure. So super successful, and in working with all of these big companies, but then you decided to make some changes in your life as well. So for example, you no longer work in Hong Kong right now, you work in London. So can you tell me a little bit about what caused you to move to London?
So it sounds like almost another like dream story, particularly for the ladies here in this conversation. Um, so in 2019, my job was finishing with Radius Innovation. I was design director for Radius Innovation, and I was looking after the team in Hong Kong and Shanghai. But because of the Trump policy at the time, so the company that I was working at, they were closing down the Shanghai office and Hong Kong office. My only project that remained was in Hong Kong. I was closing that down, and then I worked with the Bay Area team and Hong Kong team to create some project and finishing that and closing down the office. So in 2019, that's when I met my husband in Bali. So it was like we were just met each other, and then in I think the 6 times we saw each other, and he asked me to marry him. So that's kind of why I'm in London, because he is from Bulgaria and he's a medical doctor practice in London. So for me, because I was ending my job anyway, and it made a lot of sense for me to move to London rather for him to move to Hong Kong, because his license wouldn't be able to practice in Hong Kong. So that's why I eventually moved to London.
Okay. So right now at this part of your story, right, everything is looking good. You met somebody and you're going to move to another city. Great, no problem. You've done that before. You lived in all these other countries. So, but I know that things did not always go as planned. So can you tell me about what happened when you tried to move to London and also start your UX career at the same time?
Yeah, so when in 2019, that at the end of 2019, that's when I finished off the entire employment with Radius Innovation in the Bay Area and in Hong Kong. So then I was like, well, since I worked for so long and we're thinking about getting married anyway, why don't we just kind of stay in London but travel around in Europe? So I was staying in Portugal at the time, beginning of 2020. And then that's when my husband, we said we're going to get married, but I didn't get the ring until like end of February. Mm-hmm. I don't know why men always like to propose in like Valentine's Day, but it was like around Valentine's Day that he proposed.
It seemed like a great idea in February 2020, right? Yeah, to make all of these plans.
And it felt like a great idea, exactly. So we didn't think it was a bad idea, obviously, because the pandemic didn't happen. But then it was already starting in Hong Kong. But nobody thought that it was going to be such a, like a global thing. So we said, okay, well, our wedding cannot be happening in Hong Kong, so let's do it in Macedonia, which is where he also has a citizenship there. So he's Macedonian but has a Bulgarian passport. But so what happened was I went into Macedonia in beginning of March to prepare all the documentation. And as you can remember, beginning of March was still quite okay. I was passing through in different borders. No one even noticed that there were the pandemic going on. And then I remember I went into Macedonia on March 10th, 2020. And it took 10 days for me to collect the documents that I need to get married. So by March 17, 2020, that's when the lockdown started. And I didn't get my document yet. I was still waiting for my document to actually have that wedding documentation. And then my husband at the time was working in London, and the cases is already up. People are coming into the hospital and dying. He's working way overtime. And then I remember it was March 20th, which is, I think we planned the wedding on the 25th of March or something like that. All the plane grounded. There was no way he can come into London, like right before our wedding. And he was in London and I was in Macedonia. And then that literally completely separate us. And that was probably I would say, out of all these different experience that I have, the most hopeless moment, because I didn't know what's going to happen. I didn't speak Macedonian. I was staying with my in-laws that didn't speak English. And I didn't, I had a job offer in GSK in London, but then they didn't move forward because of the pandemic. I interviewed with Shock and Ninja as a VP, and then it didn't move forward because of the pandemic. There were just a lot of things that didn't supposed to happen that didn't happen because the pandemic. And in my heart, it was just, all these studies that I've done, and all this hard work that I've done, and all this experience that I have, I didn't know what to think, because I don't even know how and when I'm going to get out of Macedonia. Even though Macedonia is kind of a nice country, but I didn't have good memory of it. I remember, I don't know if it was Dan that I talked to you, Ashley, or was I talking to Mike?
I think you were talking with Mike, and I think it's really hard to have a good impression of any country where you're separated from your professional network.
Yeah.
You're separated by a language barrier, and then you're in this unprecedented situation personally with being in a new country, being separated from your husband, and then also just in terms of just globally this pandemic. So I think it was really I think it that would be a moment where just trying to keep track of, oh my God, what do I do? Would have been really hard, because you have all of these emotions like, what am I going to do? Why don't I have a job? How am I going to get my career on track in this situation? So what I am really impressed by in your story is how at this point, which I think a lot of people might have been just really, they might have blamed themselves, or they might have had a really dark time. You didn't give up. So what I'd like to explore are the things that you did to cope with your career change and just the uncertainty in this extreme situation.
Yeah, so that opens up the reason why I have to bring up Mike and CareerFoundry, because I let myself almost 2 weeks just extremely depressed. I don't use that word often, but that word works perfectly at the time that I was stuck in Macedonia. I think I cried. I just let the emotional out. Side needs to get out, like that upset, and why me, And I think in a way, you need to let that emotional side out, and then you can plan. So that's when I start talking I had a call with Mike, and I remember, and I really appreciate it, because it's so nice to have someone to the world is difficult, and planning is hard, and you're in a hopeless situation, but then someone else is there to provide that encouragement and provide that. It's almost like a coach, like you're exercising and you're
It
like,
is. It is literally, we are career coaches. There is a reason why we're called that.
literally, don't give up. So talking to Mike, he gave me the UX course, the entire UX course. So by the way, I took the UI course, but I didn't take the UX course. So he gave me the material, and it's not just me. Everyone can have it. If you take CareerFoundry, you just won't have the mentor support and you won't have the certificates, but you can get the course material if you asked for it, and you can read through them. These are part of it. So I read through it, and every single day I just put myself into doing all these homework, trying to get myself through all these reading. And then on the side of it, since I didn't know how long I was going to stay in Macedonia, so I put myself every single day to work on my website. So I have a personal website that was finished while I was in Macedonia. I updated my resume. I started talking to everyone that maybe is in my industry or not in my industry. So I start networking, and not necessarily talking about, hey, how are you, how's your work, but more about just carefully wanted to know what other people are going through in this particular time in the industry, and just sharing opinion, and not necessarily trying to get a job. Is like, I feel like when you're trying to go to meet someone and your goal is only to trying to get a job, people sense it. But I go in more about just trying to get to know someone and listen to them and listen to their stories. So that's what I did throughout the entire time I was there. I even started a Macedonian expat got stranded in Macedonia Facebook group. Kid you not. I met some American, I met some Taiwanese, I met some other people, and just kind of like a support group, because no one understands Macedonian. And we don't know when the airport was supposed to open. We're trying to gather different cars, humanitarian plane, and see if we can go to Germany or somewhere else. So, and it wasn't that many of us in Macedonia, so maybe like 20 of us. And that was kind of how I went through from the end of March all the way. We didn't finish and able to leave Macedonia until the beginning of June. So my wedding was June 18th.
Okay. Well, I hope that it was a nice wedding, but you certainly earned it with all of the difficulties there in that situation. But I do want to reiterate what you said is absolutely true. So many people think of networking as just going up to somebody and saying, "I want a job," or kind of finding ways to say that without saying that. But what it really is it's about being a part of a community and building the community that you're in, and getting to know people, because you never know. You don't just learn, get a UX job, say, through knowing a UX designer. You get a UX job by you could get one by knowing somebody who knows somebody, or somebody saying, hey, this person is really awesome and reliable. They really helped me out in this difficult situation. And you're looking for somebody to work on your website, I think that this person would be perfect. So if you come at networking from a place of, me, what can I get out of it? People 100% pick up on that. But if you just want to get to know people, get to know what their interests are, then you will be a lot more successful in your relationship building and networking. And that is what I've heard this over and over from our successful grads, for sure.
Absolutely.
So you finally made it to England. You're all moved in. You're married. And if you had gotten a job right away, this interview would be done. But unfortunately, it wasn't that easy for you still, because you still struggled a little bit when you got to England. So can you tell me a little bit about the challenges? Because not only were you moving to a new country, but you were also making design.
Yes. So by then, I've already have this mentality that if I were able to get out of Macedonia, there's nothing in my life that could trouble me or put me down or just nothing. By then I already have this really strong mentality to understand that there's nothing that's going to stop me. So when I came into UK, which is August of 2020, if any of you are familiar with or living in UK, then you would know from August until a little bit going into October, and then UK went through a lot of lockdowns. So we were pretty much closed the entire country from October, and then open for like a few days in, I think, November or something, and then open for like a few more days in December, and then all the way until pretty much June of this year. That's when we fully opened. So in the midst of the pandemic going into UK, I I don't think I mean, it was just so many cover letters that I sent out. I I sent so many out and I get so many rejection that these rejection no longer, I don't have feelings towards these rejection. And I think that it's that's, I think that's what everyone needs to think about when you think about finding a job. Don't get affected by rejection, because it's going to happen. So I can tell you already, my way of dealing with job search at the time. Let me reiterate. So I got into the UK the 4th of August. I got my working document October 15th. I didn't start working in Avon until March. So that was what? That was 7 months. So that's 7 months of not working and thinking about like, oh, why am I work? But I didn't think about that. I was thinking about, well, if I got off Macedonia, that's a blessing already, and nothing is going to stop me. And I developed a system, almost like a Salesforce. When I say Salesforce, it refers to how I used to go in business development as a design director and working with the business development team. I look at how many cover letters and application I sent out, and how many of those turns into an interview, and how many interview from that turns into a solid opportunity, and from those, how many of those actually yields an actual job offer. So I look at it just purely that way. So that's why I no longer even think about rejection. I'm just like, oh, okay, well, I sent out 25 this week. I will need to send out 100 to get maybe 10 interviews. So I keep going that way. And then I stop a little bit during Christmas. And then I start again right after that, because I know people come back from vacation and I need to work on it. And I developed a way of how I see, how I write my cover letter fast. And then I would, first statistic, I would highlight keywords in the job post, and I would compare them to different company and see which are the more important keywords for these type of roles. And I would put them all into Excel and I compare them. And which proven to be, at least from my perspective, it was a very good way of keeping track on my progress, because I still could call Ashley, but I can't. I graduated a long time ago, so I can't really utilize that job search help that I should have, because I graduated, I think, like end of 2019. But that's the type of methodology that I sort of adhere to, based on some of the teaching that I got from Ashley and got from Mike before that. And even though I wasn't in the job search program, I still was talking to Ashley. I think I was talking to Mike first, and then Ashley still follow up to make sure that, I'm on track with my job search. And so I'm very grateful, because I think even though you guys didn't have to, you were being very supportive. And at the same time, I still continue to do the networking, but my networking has changed a little bit, because before it was expat that got stranded in Macedonia. Then the second wave of these type of networking is more about understanding the design landscape in UK space as someone else, as an expat, So I was able to get a lot of people. Like, for example, I find this executive director in McKinsey, and she's Italian. She come from the Bay Area, and we had some chat and we became friends. I also talked to another really nice, lovely girl from the north in the Midland area. She's a industrial designer, but she's also working on her own project, doing freelance. So I here and there I met a lot of really strong-minded women, and almost group another have another group of people whom I can kind of get advice from, but not so much about trying to find a job. Like, I don't think that was ever the conversation. It was more about, hey, like, what is a good restaurant to go to in London, or what would you recommend? Or someone would know someone that knows someone. And what Ashley mentioned, that you go into network, it doesn't even have to be UX designer. I could give you an example. In 2019, I went on a scuba diving trip in Bali. I met a father of an industrial design student. And today, I talked to another guy who's hiring an intern, and I introduced that person's son to the company that I talked to. So you never know these network. Sometimes I could be recommending someone. Sometimes someone could be recommending me to someone else. Just always keep a very positive outlook in terms of who and how you network. But never look into try not to be very goal oriented when you're trying to network.
Yeah, and it's about almost like building a community, a professional community. And one of my favorite things about networking, piggybacking on what you said, is it creates a way for you to be able to others. It's a way for you to be able to help others find opportunities. So it's not just about, a lot are intimidated because they think, oh, I'm an introvert, or I'm not really interested in selling myself. But it's not really about that. It's about showing people that you care about the professional community that you're in, that you want to learn about it as much as you can. And it's also about helping other people fill their needs as well. So I kind of want to take a minute just to remind people, I see some people commenting in the chat, how difficult it can be when you get a lot of rejections and taking it personally, and I'm interested in what they should do or UX. If you have a question for Emily, or if you have a comment, maybe if it would be good if you could turn that into a question, so that, because we do have time for questions at the end. And so anything about what we're talking about here, or about physical product versus digital design, the differences, anything we don't bring up that you would be interested in hearing about, you can at any time just put that in the chat. And then Jakob will come back, and then he'll be asking these questions. So if you have something you would like to talk to Emily about, you can actually find out about that at the end of our interview here. So I really recommend, if you have a question or a comment, that you put that in the chat, and we will do our best to get to that for sure. So again, I wanted to kind of go back to not taking it personally when you get rejections. Mm-hmm. And one of the things I know that you said, your struggle in Macedonia was so, like, that was the worst thing that you'd ever had to be through. So when you got out of that, it really didn't, it felt like you could do anything. But was there anything else that you did? Because obviously a lot of the people here have not been in that same exact situation of being stranded. Was there anything that you told yourself, or any positive self-talk or mantras or anything like that you said to remind yourself that your skills were still valuable, and to keep a positive mindset?
Yeah, I think so whenever you get a rejection, first thing first, don't delete the email, but then put them somewhere else where you don't see it. Yeah. So okay, well, it's a rejection, but then, out of sight, out of mind. So don't put them away from your inbox immediately. And then so it's stored somewhere else. You can go and look at it later. It's always good to see if that person is willing to tell you why they didn't pick you. It's always good. Whether it's whether it's we just don't think you have the right qualification, or whether they say, oh, your portfolio doesn't have this and this and that, which is what we're looking for. But I can tell you already, it's very rare that they do that. And when the company do that, it's usually a very good company, and then you have a good feedback from them. But then another thing is, you have to, every single day, you have to give yourself that validation. So 2 things I would generally suggest people to do: meditation, and then another thing is yoga. Because when you meditate, particularly positive type of reinforcement and meditation, a lot of times I always tell people it's just the first job that you need to get into. Once when you get the first job, everything else doesn't matter anymore, because you're just going to go up from there. But to crack that nuts open, it's not easy. So you have to keep yourself positive, because the moment when your energy is not up, and then these rejections getting into you, you're going to carry that energy to your next interview. And no one wants to hire someone that has these type of negative energy. So that 2 things, which is yoga and meditation, is extremely important. Every single day you should do so. And then before every interview, when you get them, always spend 5 to 10 minutes. I think was it Mike told me that? I don't remember. Mm-hmm. But literally, you have a prep, almost like a self-pitching to yourself. Mm-hmm. You got this. You're great at this, and literally you have to read that script and tell yourself, because it's so important before the interview that you are confident, because no one wants to hire someone that are not confident. So it sounds very like a movie almost, but I literally do that, and particularly for a job that I care a lot about. But I get it. When you really want that job, for example, I was interviewing for this job that I really, really want, because it's a medical device that I really thought that it makes very great impact for society. It's really helping patients. And then I apply for that job. I know it's a bit out of my league, but I was like, I'm going to try it anyway. And then after so many interviews, usually just 1 or 2, and then they reject you, is fine. I don't really care. It's when they give you 5, 6, and 7 interviews, and then they reject you. That's when you're like, oh my God, I can't believe it. How would I do wrong? Like, could I have done better? And then there's a lot of self-doubt going on, right? So that's when you really need that yoga, meditation, and self kind of like talk to you and tell yourself that, you're so much better than that. And if you can't do that yourself, find a friend. You need a friend who can do that.
Yeah, absolutely. That was when I was in a similar situation. That was absolutely what, it's easy when you're just in your box and you're not getting jobs to think, oh, it's me. But having a friend who can say, no, you're great, you have skills and you can do it. That's absolutely valuable. And you should practice positive self-talk. And if you can't, because sometimes it's not always 100% possible, sometimes we're in a negative headspace, friends are so important too in the job search. Don't be afraid to reach out if you're struggling. It's everybody has been in a situation like this before, I guarantee you. So we talked about a little bit about keeping a positive mindset. So tell me about how you landed this job in Avon. How did you eventually get hired?
Sure. So I mentioned when I arrived in UK in August, and there was a round of a lot of rejection, and then a lot of interviews as well. And then by Christmas, I took a break, because you know what, like, you got to take a break, because everybody's taking a break anyway. So you also need to pay attention to the cadence of the country that you're applying for jobs. For example, if you're in some country in Eastern Europe, the Christmas is different time, FYI. But obviously in UK, it's the December 25th, 24th weekend, and you stop, just to give yourself a break as well. And then so I start again in January, another round of interview, application. So I sent about 25 cover letters, application every week. And then as I was collecting it, I've realized that August time wasn't very 100 cover letter will not give me no more than one interviews. So I've started to realize, oh, okay, the market is picking up a little bit. So by January, February, I've realized that for every 100 cover letters that I send out, I get about 7 or 8 interviews. So it's starting to get a lot higher. So every approximately 10 cover letters, I'm getting one reply. So which is good, which is a good sign. And then when I got Avon, I already had maybe 3 or 4 companies that I ongoing interview as a UX lead. And then what's different with Avon is that they give me a task, and I love task. The reason why is because, look, we are new students, so our portfolio has a lot of UX work, but they're not necessarily commercials type of work. And in our resume, we don't necessarily have a lot of work that's representing UX. So company will look at it and be like, oh, well, you don't have experience, because they could say that if they have other candidates that has a lot of those experience, they're just going to say, you know what, I'm going to find someone who has less risks. Great. So when I go with Avon, they gave me a task. The reason why I love it was because I can spend as much time as I want, because I'm not working, right? To show them I really want this job and that I really know what I'm talking about. So when they gave me a task to look at what Avon brochure, how can they improve, I went all out. I went interviewing with people right now who's working as a sales rep, interviewing them, getting a survey, putting it together, and then making mock-up, and then making animation, making everything that I can think of that can show my skills. And I went all out and go all in. And it shows that I was probably very good. At the time, I was just like, oh yeah, maybe I did enough. But I'm a perfectionist, so I kept thinking that I wasn't doing enough, right? Then now, the reason why I know that I did a lot was because now we're hiring, we use the same task for everyone. And then and then I look at other people's work, I was like, I now understand why I was hired right away, because my work compared to everyone else, other candidates that I'm hiring at the moment, I've realized I've done way beyond what everyone else was doing. Mm-hmm. So my that's kind of how I got the Avon job, is really pour my heart out to show that first, I'm a hardworking person. Second, I have the skills, and third, I really know what I'm talking about skills wise.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's I don't really know any fields in 2021 where you can just go get a degree and then have everything that you need to get a top job. I really, like, right out of school, I really can't. Maybe, if you get some kind of really specific certification, some kind of really obscure tool, right? But most people these days, you have to find a way to separate yourself from the competition. And the way, if you just have a degree from a boot camp or a university or whatever school you're in, you really need to make sure that you are showing those skills. So viewing a test or a practicum as a opportunity for you, and not as, this isn't an opportunity for me to show my creativity and my perspective, instead of, oh no, I have to do this. This is really hard. This is really scary. That's really something that you should do. It's the more, and not just with tests though, but just in your projects, trying to make sure that you show, that you are showing that you didn't just graduate and decide you were done, that you continued to work on your skills. And even the practice that you had earlier of, okay, I'm probably not going to be able to get a job at this time, so why don't I read other course materials and just take this opportunity to learn, and just learn as much as you can all the time. That's really, these are the things that will separate an okay applicant from the person who's going to get hired for who's going to get interviewed and who's going to go to the higher rounds of interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but sometimes you might spend a lot of time on a task and then you still don't get the job.
Yeah, that's absolutely true, right? Like it's one of and that's where what you were saying earlier about not taking rejection personally is really important, because there could be any number of reasons why somebody didn't want to hire you. It could be that their CEO's nephew applied for the job. It could be that they had somebody who had worked for a competitor and had done the exact job. And you might not be able to compete with somebody who had done the same exact job that they're asking for. There might be somebody who is a better fit than you. There could be any number of reasons that you don't have any access to why someone else could get a job, unless they give you feedback. And again, like Emily said, it's then important to take what is useful and to track that and see how you can integrate that into your job search strategy.
Yeah. And also when you're getting feedback, I get this from I get this from Project One Way. If they're giving you feedback, right? But the reason why I say that is because some people are very defensive, and then someone will say, "Oh yeah, because you didn't do that," and then they get immediately like, "Oh yeah, my idea is great." Don't do that, because employer is going to look at you. May say today you don't get hired, right? Mm-hmm. Maybe they can recommend you to somebody else. You never know. So always keep, particularly for designer, you have to be open-minded for criticism. So the way that you receive feedback also show how mature you are as a person.
Yeah. It's definitely something really important to try, and it's important to take everything as a learning opportunity if you can. And I know it's really hard, especially if you're struggling, and it's not always easy to be unemployed when you might not have a job and you might not have as much money, and there's a lot of pressures that happen. But it's still important to try and just learn as much as you can during this period. So why don't we talk about just kind of, so you did get the job at Avon, which was awesome. And so after you took the test, right, and after you did all of this preparing, what did you do for the interview? How did your interview for them go?
I had the interview with the design manager first, and that was great. And then they gave me a task, and then I went back and I did the task, and I spent a lot of time on it, and probably a little too much time on it. And then they had another interview, which is with the design manager and developers. And then that was fine. And then I had another interview with the director of beauty, and I don't even know his title, to be honest, some kind of director. But then he responsible for a lot of different platforms. And then I had another interview with him, and that was, I think the task in itself was enough. Those were just sort of interview, just kind of discussion. But the task result was the primary reason why it shows that I have the ability and skills and personality to succeed in the role that I'm in right now.
Yeah, I mean, there's nothing that beats results, right? If you can show proof that you can design, then that's going to ultimately impress people more than anything that you could say. I am wondering, and I think this is actually maybe, I do have a question for you, but I also think it might have been in the chat here. So why don't you tell us a little bit briefly what you're doing now and what your role is now with Avon, and how you were able to get that position, and then maybe we'll move into the question of this interview.
Sure. So right now I work in Avon, and there's 7 different platforms within Avon in terms of mobile platforms. I'm specifically responsible for everything that's in discovery for Avon On. So when we say Avon On, what it means is that specifically for sales rep experience, for example, whoever is creating an account and then trying to sell to different people, and then they make commission out of it. So we're trying to design the greatest experience ever that is for these type of people, and that's what I'm responsible for. However, when I joined Avon in less than 2 months, they were already promoting me to be a design manager. Because again, and another thing I want to talk about is that when you have other experience and when you come into the company and you look and present yourself as a competent person, that's when opportunity would open it to you, even though you don't ask for it. But I didn't get that opportunity because I declined the offer, because I felt like I needed to focus more within Avon, and I wanted to be more of a UX lead for a while before I go into be a manager, because then, be a manager is great, but then you get to manage a lot of people, which is what I used to do. But then you get a lot less interaction with the product owner as well as the developers. And that's not really what I want. But they see that management ability in me, so they want to push me that side already. But anyway, I declined that. And so that's related back to what I work on daily basis. So I go talk to I don't go talk to them. They literally all online virtual setting. I talk to the product owner a lot. I talk to the product manager a lot, and also talk to the developer a lot, understanding the business needs in terms of what we're trying to do, and also understanding from the research department perspective what kind of user feedback we have collected from. And then I would start creating wireframes. I would start creating how the workflow is going to be, and pretty similar to what you guys are learning, really. Like wireframes, trying to match it up. But what's different is that Avon has its own ecosystem and style guide. So I have to go back to check with the style guide person to make sure, hey, is this button that I'm using works with the style guide? And then I will work with the UI designer so they can fill in the content inside of the wireframes that I created. And then with their help, then I will communicate with the developers to understand, for example, is this component, do we have something that's already made? Do we have something that's from another library that we can borrow from? Or are we going to build something native? Are we going to build something that is specific for Avon? Are we creating something brand new animation? So since I got into Avon, we have pumped up a lot of new things, because I joined when it decided to do a lot of new things. So I've done a new dashboard, which is crazy. I've done a new dashboard, new submenu. Basically, have changed the entire visual of Avon since I joined, and it's only been 5 months. Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome. So yeah, it's really exciting to hear about how you not only got a job, but then really quickly, once you got that first job, right, the opportunities just started coming for you. Like it just took that one opportunity for your career to just like,
yeah,
if you wanted to go management, if you wanted to be a UX lead.
Absolutely. So once when you get your first job, and for me, it's about staying in your first job, not meaning like, oh, you're afraid of you getting fired. It's you keep having this recruiter and coming in and trying to see if you want to switch to a different company, and you're just trying to block this out so that you can focus on what you're working on. Like you said, once when you open that box, it's so many opportunity out there. UX is such a high demand job. If you are not happy with your company, you can really move to another company in like this.
Yeah. And once you've gotten the first job,
the
first job is really, really hard. But
yes.
Once you've gotten that, especially if you have these transferable skills, then it can really be amazing for you. So again, if you have any more questions about that side, I'm sure Emily would be happy to answer them. But I think Jakob has been collecting some questions already. So let's go ahead and see if Emily can't answer the questions that are already here.
Great. Yeah, thank you so much, everyone, for submitting your questions. So if you have any, submit them to the Q&A in the Q&A tab, and we'll try to get to them. So first question from Ariel, do you think an internship is needed to move into a UX position right after completing a program like at CareerFoundry? or do you think it's not necessary?
If you can get an internship and you haven't been able to get a real job yet, then please do it. But if you are able to get a real job already and you have 2 job offers, one is internship and one is a UX designer, of course you're going to take the UX designer.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to be intentional with these kinds of choices. So you have to look at you shouldn't just say, oh, I have to get an internship because no one's going to want to hire me. I think you need to look at it and say, okay, first of all, is this internship paid? And is that payment going to meet my needs? What am I doing right now? Am I already using my time in a constructive way? Because an internship might be better than, doing, if you were in a rut, and you weren't really doing anything because it was just really hard having an unstructured day. Maybe an internship could, yes, help you get experience, but also help you to find some structure and some meaning and give time some kind of significance, which is often very helpful. And then also, what kinds of tasks are you going to be doing? Are you going to be learning a new skill in this internship, or are you going to be doing the UX equivalent of getting coffee? Are you going to be just doing the same thing over and over that you already know how to do? So if you want to take an internship, whether it's paid or not, I think you really need to be intentional about how it's going to help you in your career, and you have to know what you want to do in your career before you make that decision. And then if it is unpaid, my advice would be to make sure that you are getting paid in some other way than money. So if they're not paying you in money, make sure, again, you're learning a new skill, that this person is actually going to help you build your network, and that you're not just giving away your skills for free, because there are going to be people who look at bootcamp grads and know that they can, get a landing page, for free for their company, or, there are people out there who maybe want to see what they can get out of you, and your skills are valuable. This is not an easy course, and you shouldn't sell yourself short. So that would be, just be ready to set boundaries and know what you want to get out of it if it's an internship, particularly if it's unpaid. If it's paid, it's better than some money is better than none, for sure.
I definitely didn't know that there's unpaid internship out there. My generation, we didn't have unpaid internship. I'm a bit older generation, just so you know.
Yeah, I feel like I came of age in the first crash back in 2009. So I know there were definitely people willing to take advantage of highly educated people. So just be careful. Weigh the pros and cons, and if you're going to get something out of it, do it. But if you're not going to get something out of it, you don't have to.
Thank you. We have a question from Dilara, who's asking, UX is a very popular field right now and sounds like a lot of people are trying to get into it. How could we distinguish ourselves from the competition?
I think, first of all, like Ashley said, you need to have a goal, what company you want to work for, in what area of UX you want to focus on, and then how do you separate yourself from your competition. I don't know if I mentioned it to you, but I also mentor for CareerFoundry, and some of my students has this type of question quite often. So some of them could be with a background that's not very strong in UI, which is fine. If you want yourself to be more of a content strategist, that type of UX, then you need to frame yourself, your resume, and the type of job that you're looking for towards that direction. If you're someone who is more research-based, design research, that type of UX designer, then you want to put yourself and the portfolio and the resume that is closer to that direction, and then use your competitor and research and try to compare, how am I comparing to other people in the same level? So then when you start doing these research, then you will have a much better idea how you can get into it. That's my
yeah. And I also think that one way you set yourself apart from the competition is just to remember that you do have to take your time with your materials. You have to make sure that you're analyzing these job positions, that you're reading the keywords that are in the posting and putting them in your resume and in your cover letter, and that you're trying to make yourself as interesting to the person recruiting for the given job as possible, because it's not, C-level work doesn't really cut it when you have a lot of competition. You really need to make sure that you have done the work to make yourself interesting to this specific company and for this specific job. So again, know what you want to do, like Emily said, and then make sure that your application package reflects that.
Yeah, I think that's I want to add to something to that. My personal approach, particularly when I say if I'm looking at a job, and I'm going to give a very solid example. Say if I wanted to work for GSK, for example, and I would go into researching how are they doing this particular quarter? How are they doing last year? Are they coming out with new vaccine? Then I try to put that information in my cover letter. And then I try to also research who am I going to be talking to for this particular interview? What is their background? If this particular person has a very unique system design background, then I would lead my conversation that is very specifically personal to that particular person, because people are you will get their attention right away if they know that you have done this research on them. It sounds a bit creepy, but trust me, you will get their attention. And that is what you need to set yourself apart, aside from just high quality for example, A+ quality work. That's how because everyone is A+. A lot of people is A+. How do you stand out among all these A+, right?
Hmm.
So these are the research and additional touch that you will need to put in all of your applications for jobs.
And this might mean that maybe you put in slightly less applications. It is better. It is important to apply to jobs, but it is better to make sure that those applications are high quality and targeted. So if you're somebody who's putting in tons and tons and tons and tons of job applications, it may be you're not doing this and you're not taking the time to target these applications and target the positions you're looking for. And fewer applications in which you spend more time and care tend to yield better results than just sending out your resume to anybody without spending a lot of time and looking at, is this really what I want to do, or is this really a good fit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Great. We have an interesting question from Eric. Eric currently works in retail, is pursuing a UX design certificate program, and works on a portfolio and case studies. Do you think that's enough to get into UX, even though he has no professional experience in the industry?
My question to Eric would be, do you think another person would want to hire you with that amount of quality of work in your portfolio? I often want to advise my students is that think about it from the person who's hiring. Yeah. If the person is particularly working in retail environment and the brand that you have worked in, that could have been something that is very much relevant. And then, yeah, that answer would be a yes. But if you're talking about, I'm talking about UX design for SaaS system, right? Then, well, if you give me that application as an employer, then I would be like, well, that's totally irrelevant. So I don't know if I can hire that person. It never set an average as your goal to reach. You should always set more than an average. So that would be my answer for your question. I don't know if it really helps.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, it can be challenging, right? If you're making a career change. And I think it's difficult if you have if you've worked in the retail industry a long time and you applied to another retail job, you could probably get a job very quickly. But if you're now trying to make this career pivot, it might be a lot harder, and it's hard sometimes not to take that personally, and think, oh, I made a bad choice. But no, not really. It's just, it might take you a little longer, or you might have to work a little bit harder, or get creative about how you brand yourself. And like you said, I think e-commerce or working for retail companies, particularly ones that you're familiar with, might be a good step for you, showing that you are familiar with this background, and then thinking about leveraging how you are familiar with working with customers, that you could help to, you just think about the possible transferable skills without looking at specifically what your job is in retail, because that's a huge industry. I couldn't necessarily tell you which one to pick, but I think what people don't do is they don't really take an inventory of all the stuff that they do in their jobs, in their volunteer positions, and in their projects, and think about, oh yeah, I did that. And that's one of the things that I do as a coach, is I try and talk to people about all of the things they do, because sometimes people don't realize all of the things they do, and then sometimes they also compare themselves to people who are, really super successful or have worked in the industry for a long time. They're like, well, I don't know how to do that, and I'm not that good. And it's more important to think about what you have and what you can do and what you can bring to the table. And that's something that you can absolutely talk to your career specialist about, if you are a student with us when you join job prep, is to help you make sure that you know what your value is, because no one's going to know that but you. So we can also help you for sure.
And maybe we have time for another couple of questions. So how do you know when you're ready enough to start applying? There's always more tech to learn. Sounds like imposter syndrome question.
It's a difficult question, because how I think I'm ready is usually I always start looking into what is out there first, because then you can start. Although previously I said I hand in 25 applications a day, but I have a lot of them that I just send them out, and then I have a handful of them that I carefully craft. Yeah. So when you carefully craft them, and I talk about the amount of research that I do for that particular company, and the amount of research just for the person who I think I'm sending an application to, then you would start knowing what they're looking for, if it's enough. Yeah. If they're looking for someone who has a good understanding in certain things that you don't have, then maybe I'm not ready for it yet. But if it's just maybe you have 90% of everything, or even 70% of everything that they're asking for, then you can probably go ahead. So it really is I would say each job is different. And when you start doing your research, then you will know and you have an idea. Would you say anything different, Ashley?
Yeah, I think that it's absolutely important to make sure that you are doing your research, and that if a targeted application is really going to look better than maybe even a more qualified candidate who clearly phoned it in. As somebody who's been reviewing applications, I am more drawn to an application that somebody has clearly made an effort in. It takes 2 seconds to see when somebody has made an effort to make a decent application, and when somebody has just tried to submit something quickly. And I feel like, even if the person doesn't have all of this hasn't done all of the things that I've asked for, if they have shown, if they've put in a targeted cover letter, they've related what they've done to the specific things that I've asked for in the job application. They've really, their cover letter looks nice. It's proofread, it's concrete and specific. Their CV highlights as much as possible the keywords for we know that stuff immediately. And so I would say, just do your best with your applications. And sometimes you can get an interview even if you don't feel qualified. And I think sometimes when you're new and you might have some imposter syndrome, if you wait until you feel qualified and you don't feel any anxiety about a job, then you might just never apply. And then the one way to make sure you never get a job is to not put in an application. You do have to eventually apply to jobs. But it's just a matter of, and then also understanding what you want to do, and understanding how what you have done is related to the job, and being clear before you apply.
Thank you. And last two-part question from Katie, who is asking, I'm curious if a lot of interviewers ask about the break in your resume, Emily, for example, 7 months. And how do you manage that question? And then I'll be back in a second with the second part of the question.
Sure. You mean my break when I wasn't working, right? So I have a trick to it, and it's not easy for someone who doesn't have a lot of experience to do it. So I have a lot of clients that scatter around the world, and I've been working industrial design with them, or UX, and doing sprints workshops and stuff like that. So I actually have my own company, so I just say I work for my own company. But another question that people would try to say, oh, well, say if I work for Avon for a short amount of time, and then I have other interview, and that could be, people would ask you, like, why are you leaving so soon? Then you could just say, the company don't align with your vision, and then you can say that vision has to be something that it's a strong belief within, human-centered design, or something that's within design, that you can use that as a reason to leave that company. So, but generally, whenever you have a break, I would say try to make a story that you really, it's something that's towards a constructive things. For example, doing something like consulting, or some people put career break, which I don't really understand. Or some people would say charity. That's a really good thing, I thought. But for me, I put I was consulting, which is very true. I was working.
And that's where, I think very few people do nothing during periods of long-term employment. Usually very often there is something that you do, either some kind of volunteer work, some kind of something that you've been doing. So that's something that you can talk to a career specialist about spinning, or just understanding what you did. Because I think sometimes it's not about spinning it. It's about actually understanding, like, hey, I did a lot during this period, and so if you volunteered, understanding how to communicate what you did in a way that's interesting to the recruiter, because you don't just want to put stuff, a whole lot of stuff that is just filler. You want to make sure that it is going to be as interesting as possible. And then another thing too, if your resume says there's a gap, and the gap is between March 2020 and July 2020, people kind of understand what was going on in the world at that particular point. There's this coronavirus thing that no one's heard about.
I don't know if you heard about coronavirus.
For sure.
So, okay, and thank you. Part two of that question is that a lot of companies ask for 3 to 5 years experience for a junior UX position. Do you feel like it's possible to still apply for these positions when you don't have any experience?
Oh, they always do. That's what they do. It's like they don't even think about it when they say, oh yeah, I want a junior designer, but I want them to be managing people already, and then have like, that's what they want. Everyone wants a unicorn.
Because if they can get somebody to apply to that who has that experience, it's a huge win. Like, of course, you would want somebody to apply to a junior role who can do like management and has done UI, and of course they want that.
Design a coffee corner, go and sell, and also fix the toilet, all these things, lovely things. Everyone wants that, but in reality, when you start speaking to them, then they're really looking for the right personality that matches their team, and the skill set is extremely important, and your portfolio is extremely important. But a lot of times, at the end of the day, when you pass that, it's really how you gel with the team. So yeah, absolutely. If they say 3 to 5 year experience, and if you think that this company is who you want to work for, go ahead, apply for it, and do that research, and make sure that your resume and your cover letter really resonate some of the keywords in job description. So go ahead.
Yeah, and sometimes sometimes they may just have not even know that the application says 3 to 5 years. That may just be like an automatic field. There could be any number of reasons why that might be there, or there may be any number of things that 3 to 5 years could mean. It might not be 3 to 5 years of direct UX experience. It could be 3 to 5 years of experience. It's UX plus education plus experience in maybe related industry. So I would say that I wouldn't let that stop you from taking the time to put in an application, because what's there to lose from putting in an application?
Yeah. Just giving you an example. So I did one of those that wasn't what Ashley was telling you about, which is to do a bit more research. So the other day I applied, maybe about 3 months ago, I applied for a job that they were asking for a principal designer. And then today I interview with them, and then they look at my resume and they start talking to me, and then they immediately have changed the price, have changed the amount of the job role based on my experience. So I didn't get the job because I'm going to have to further explain, but I can't talk about it at the moment. It's confidential. But the CTO was very fond with my experience, and then they were able to completely change the job description according to my resume. So that's what I'm saying. A lot of times it's how once when you pass a certain level, it's about how you work with the team and your personality that shines.
Yep. Yeah, I could name several people who that's happened to. That happens a lot, actually. And it's about the team, and it's about your interest in the company and their mission, and what kind of colleague you'll be, what kind of work you can do. There's so many factors that can go into the decision to hire somebody. It's not just a number.
Absolutely.
And with that, we are already a little bit over time. So I would like to thank you, Emily, for sharing your story with us, Ashley, and everyone who attended today. So if we didn't get to your question, please reach out to me or one of our program advisors, and they will be very happy to get back to you. And with that, I wish you good evening, good morning, wherever you're based. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.